With Stream C, which is looking at the analysis, concepts, and methodology for REDD. And today we are going to focus on how can REDD policies, programs, and projects support transformative change for gender and poverty alleviation. We will seek in this panel to explore a positive agenda on how we can capitalize on REDD as an opportunity to transform social, economic, and political paradigms to secure and enhance livelihoods of the local people. We all know that we have many expectations of REDD. Besides reducing emissions, we want REDD to contribute towards core benefits, biodiversity conservation, poverty alleviation, etc. It might seem a big burden, but I think it's a good opportunity for intersectoral work and to work across various disciplines and including gender issues and equity in order to deliver a more sustainable program and plan for reducing emissions and sustaining the livelihoods and the local economies. We have a panel of distinguished people from anthropologists, but also people working on social science, but who have a special interest on gender participation and equity issues. We will start with Ahmed Kushoro, who is an anthropologist, and he is a technical advisor with Flora and Fauna International in Indonesia, working with projects on REDD at the local level. We will then talk with Matilda, will jump in, Matilda Walimbe. She is a community REDD officer with the Environmental Protection and Development Association based in Cameroon. We will then go to Esther Luna Kanoi, who is a local partner working with IUCN, the Ecosystems Alliance, and she has been engaged with indigenous peoples, and she will tell us a bit more how the gender issues play at that level. And we will finally have Andrea Quesada, who works for the Women Environment and Development Organization based in Costa Rica, and she has been working on the tools and policies at the national level, but also trying to influence the integration of REDD issues into the safeguards. Just to start with Kushoro, I would like to know whether gender equity has been achieved at the project level, and who is better suited to champion changes at the local level to bring or strengthen women's role in REDD processes.
Thank you, Isilda. So I'll start with a bit of background of my organization and what we are doing in the last several years. So right after Bali COP, my organization Fauna Flora International start to help different actors in Indonesia in developing REDD project. One of the type of project that we are doing is specifically doing community forestry REDD project, developing that project. And in this context, then I will respond to your question. Now, the progress, if you like, the achievement that we made is that during the process of assisting local community institution designing REDD project, we now in the belief that one way to promote gender equity or stronger role of women is by doing what we call this positive discrimination toward women. It's hard in the beginning because, like you said before, community benefit, which gender is part of it, it has been seen as not the main thing. The main thing, of course, carbon, and doing other thing will compromise the effectiveness of delivering carbon benefit. But during the process, then we know that when we assist the local community in designing the process, that the challenge that we have is that there are extra effort needed to engage with women, and there are layers of constraint, if you like, from elite, government, NGO also, I think, part of the problem. Because they believe that when they say community, it is assumed that it is including all, both sex, while in reality it's not necessarily. There is different element within the community. And what the community, what assumed to be what community want or don't want, normally is what men want or don't want, not really taking into account women's. Now, other than the reluctant on engaging with women because it will be compromising the REDD objective, because the thing that we want to do is avoiding deforestation and degradation, and strengthening women's role might not be seen as strongly related to that issue. The threat of forest is not weak or less strong women's role, but something else like community chain and other things. So that's the main challenge. But taking benefit of the absence or the failure of post-Kyoto Protocol, then we have more time at the community level to engage with different group within the community, including women. So we do the same thing that we do before with men, but also this time with women as well. Initially, we thought it is a burden, but later we realized the problem is not really, not the problem, the issue is not really structural or ideological, but more practical. So having greater participation of women will promise greater success, the chance of delivering main benefit, which is carbon. So for example, if we, the real example that we have now is, in some situation, men have difficulty in designing activity or coping with the main threat of deforestation. For example, in some cases, or in many cases, the internal threat is expanding forest clearing for slash and burn cultivation. And when we ask men, what do you do to reduce that? And the answer will be long. Normally, they will get a very practical answer, give us the money, and we stop clearing the forest. And when we ask, what about if the money is stopped coming because of the uncertainty of REDD, then they say, we'll continue doing what we do. So that's the kind of practical female macho answer that we get. But when we discuss the same issue with women, then the answer is to shift from extensive to be more intensive agriculture. So having enterprise, improving production and doing several economic activity, improving value chain of what they do now, that will be better. So from the experience, then we now come to the process where women enterprise will become the main activity that will help avoid deforestation, meaning resulting benefit for climate, the main climate benefit. So because that practical reason, strengthening women's role will strengthen the performance of the community, then at this moment, basically we and friends doing it, very happy to do the same thing, to have positive discrimination, if you like, toward women. And to your second question,
sir? What, yeah, okay.
And related to second question, what did that mean? Meaning we segregate, if you like, the things that we do at the community level. So the main thing we do with the project design is identifying threat and designing activity to cope with that threat, and then relate that to MRV and benefit sharing distribution. So initially, that would be done only with men, and now we do it both, men and women. If it is possible for them to have the same thing, then that will be undertaken. Otherwise, separate facilitation exercise will be done. And if your second question, I personally think that it is better for men to advocate stronger women's role rather than women, because among men, normally, it will be easier to discuss among men facilitator or men NGO or government activists to explain why it is important to do this. Yeah, and
Okay, I would like to move on to Matilda. We will come back for you to elaborate a little bit more. Matilda, as Kushoro was saying, we tend to talk about communities as if they were homogeneous groups. We know that, REDD and gender, it has to be seen in the bigger context of integrated development. And within that, in the context of Africa, for example, there has been a big rush towards acquisition of land in order to promote investments. How do you see us working with gender aspects related to REDD in that context of bigger challenges that the communities are facing in terms of threat to their rights?
Okay. I would like to say that from our studies in Cameroon, we realized that women represent more than half of the population, the local women, and they produce 2/3 of the food that is consumed locally. But unfortunately, women has less than 2% of the land property rights, and it's due to the law and the cultural situation of the country, and even to the forest rights. It's even more difficult. It's even more difficult. Woman does not really have authority and does not take part in decision making in activities related to the forest. And I would say that REDD is a plus for climate change mitigation. REDD is a plus on this, and gender has to be taken into consideration, because if you look at the community in the African context, we already have this issue of land tenure with the government, but at the same time, coming at the community level, when you look at the community, it is a man. When you talk about the forest, the right to the forest, it is a man. It is not, women are not really taken into consideration as such in decision making and all that. But there's a positive step to this action, because in 2011, in the agric show in Ebolova, the president announced the reform of the 1994 land law, and REFACOF, that's the African Women's Network for Community Management of Forests, is in the forefront in championing the cause for reform of the land law, taking gender into consideration. The law, in a way, states that everybody could own land, but culturally, it's very difficult at the cultural level for women to own land, because women are considered to be properties in the sense that when you get married, you go to your husband's place, but in the case of divorce or death, you lose the right to all that. So we are in the forefront, working together with the traditional rulers, opinion leaders in the society, to come up with measures to address this situation, and in the ongoing REDD process in Cameroon.
So you are saying that we should challenge even the customary norms.
Yeah, I think we should we should challenge, but we should have, it should be negotiation. We should bring out the reasons why women should own land, and knowing fully well that the family in Africa depends, 80% depends on the woman and her activity in the forest. So we should, the law in a way states that you can own, but it is our custom. So we have to involve the men and the women and the customary, the traditional rulers in particular, in the reform of this law.
Thank you. We'll come back to discuss a little bit more, and also I would like to encourage the other members of the panel to complement and challenge if necessary. But I would like to move on to Esther Luna. You work on food security, adaptation and mitigation continue, specifically at the local level, working with the different indigenous peoples. I would like you to share your insights on how the work you have been doing at the local level has fed into policies at the national level and actions that support transformative gender and poverty alleviation in the context of Philippines, but in other countries as well.
Mayad Masalum, that's good morning in Binukid. Just a brief background of my organization. Kitanglad Integrated NGO is a small NGO that works in strengthening indigenous governance in South Philippines, representing about 22 indigenous tribes. We're working at the northern region. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank NORAD for giving me a chance to share this story about our work with dealing with indigenous people, especially taking the opportunity of discussing REDD as could be a venue to highlight the role of indigenous women at the same time to propose for transformative change. My experience working with them is learning something new, and perhaps probably not so much new to you. In looking at fitness of a program or a project, it had to be contextualized on local realities. That's very basic. That means what people value, what are the norms, what are the living traditions, and this is very, very important in working with indigenous tribes. In Mindanao, we're holding still about campaigning for about 1 million forest hectares, and we don't have a lot in our country. But these forests are ancestral domain areas, and there are many, many tribes. And our context is how do we navigate these worlds? We're in the quote-unquote modernity, and there's traditional communities. What is very important as a starting point is to understand the interface of culture and nature, because this is very basic with indigenous communities. Like for the tribe, nature, not just trees, not just forests, rivers, creeks, mountains, all of their life is linked to nature. It revolves to nature. And in the case of Kitanglad, plus its twin mountain in Kalatungan, in Pantaron, and 4 other ranges that we have expanded since 1996. So what do we learn from this? It's very important to know the precept. Matilda mentioned about culture, but what is the first precept of culture? For indigenous people in Mindanao, nature is fundamental to tribal life. And what is nature? It's made up of elements. Materially, well, we can see land, bugta, ancestral domain, but for them, it's their body. You can imagine the metaphor of a human being. And wahi, water, creeks, rivers, it's their blood. That's how they see it as a fundamental to their tribal life. Forests, kayu, plants, trees, blood. It's their bones, veins. So you can connect now the image of man. Light, siga, kahayag, it is their eyes. Kalamag, air, wind, it's their breathing. Tingog, sounds of animals, nature, sounds of wind, sounds of human beings, their voice. And they talk about 7 spirits of 7 important objects. Now, this is the prosperity of the tribe that should be found in every ancestral domain. To deprive them of their access, then you talk about poverty. Because if they don't have access, men, women, mothers, fathers, children, if they don't have access to this, that's another poverty issue. And yeah, these are material culture. I also mentioned about non-material, the unseen. So that's why it's very important to them that forest is viewed in different value. So they would say it's their security, or this is their home base, it's their territory. But it's also their seat of spirituality. It's their cathedral. I had a chance to walk up in a pulang for 8 hours, just uphill. And I found out that there's an altar on top. So we talk about very sacred pilgrimage. And they do it every year. They seek support from government, but the government wouldn't understand, even to get 1 sack of rice to complement for that ritual. But that
Luna, how do we take that rich knowledge on on what is valuable to the indigenous people to inform the policy agenda, particularly on REDD?
To be informed is you go walk on the ground. You don't simply propose. You have to connect to these realities. It's a privilege to be here. Before coming here, I sought the guidance of the council, the head of the council elders of the 3 tribes of Talandig, Bukid, and Higaonon, talking about this gender issue. Because for them, it's not gender. It's not categorization of male and female. Because in fact, a true leader imbibes balanced qualities of interiority. You need something of male, the yang, and the female, the yin. That's why a leader is called ininay inamay, a father, mother. Because when she exercised those duties, it's anchored in spirituality. And when this is the respect of nature prevails, then man, human being, even children, would know that if they take something from nature, they need to seek permission. And unseen beings are part of the rights holders, stakeholder. You know, there's so much discourse on direct and indirect stakeholders, but right stakeholder. But who speak for the passive stakeholders? Those that have no voices. This is vibrant in Mindanao. And in fact, I really grateful to have this opportunity to share this to you, because I also challenge that if you do have chance to go to Mindanao and go through an acceptance ritual, because that will be the time you discover the spirits of nature that is also linked with you. Some activists would have so passionate with water. They like diving. They like protect sea life. Some activists would cry if they see a tree falling down. It's being cut. They feel the pain. Tribes would cry, see mining, you know, digging. And what was that? That's our sense of being. We are connected. Okay. And the presence of these communities allow us that chance to rediscover our worth.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt. I would like to move on to Andrea to see, I mean, you have been working also on policies, contributing to the development of safeguards, but also looking at various tools that can be used in order to make sure that gender can be integrated in the REDD policies. Can you talk through more practical ways of mainstreaming gender?
Thank you, Isilda, and first of all, good morning, buenos dias to everybody. It's a true honor and pleasure to be sharing these experiences with all of you. My organization, just to contextualize briefly, it's called the Women's Environment and Development Organization, or WEDO. WEDO has a long trajectory in advocacy, and you might be wondering why an advocacy organization is being asked these questions. Why did we develop these tools? Let me tell you a little story. Back in 2010, in paragraph 72 of the Cancun Agreements, it was the first time gender was mentioned related to REDD in an official document. It mentions that countries that are developing their national strategies need to address gender considerations. Now, what does that mean? We were left back in 2010 with some ideas. There were many organizations that had been long working in forestry issues and linking it to gender. But when it came to REDD, it was not fully developed. Now, in this room, I might ask you guys, how many of you think that gender is important? And probably none of you would say that it's not. However, when it comes to actions, gender tends to be placed in a back seat or considered a light topic. And hence, we started a process of again, trying to understand not only the rationales, the conceptual analysis of what these gender considerations were and why they were important, but also to provide the know-how. The know-how in terms of content and process as well. And so we embarked in this journey, I would have to say, first with IUCN in 2011, developing gender and REDD roadmaps in Uganda, Ghana, and Cameroon. And last year with the REDD social and environmental standards, we started action research to try to understand again, what are these gender considerations in the safeguards themselves. So what did we learn? We learned that we probably need to have a practical approach, and this is why we have been developing these tools. We need to start creating a protocol to addressing gender somehow. And there are some steps that can be taken to start integrating gender into a REDD program. Steps such as an analysis of the gender differentiated use, access, and control of resources. This is to elucidate or highlight that women are stakeholders on their own. That is probably the first and most important step. They have their needs, they have their preferences, but also there are certain barriers or inequalities that would prevent them from fully and effectively participating in any of these activities, as we have been seeing today. We need to have gender differentiated analysis of risks and opportunities. We need to understand the current situation of the country, as we were discussing with my fellow panelists, the importance of understanding the reality that is happening on the ground. We then need to evaluate which of these issues are going to be relevant to REDD, because REDD cannot oversee or be able to embrace absolutely in every single or challenge every single inequality. And then we need to provide concrete suggestions. More, again, of this know-how. That really has led us to, as I said, provide some of these tools to be able to, and if I can have this slide, start thinking, thank you, of the different stages or different levels with regards to gender that a REDD program can be at. So these are terms that we've all heard, but perhaps we haven't heard that much associated to REDD. And I think it's first and foremost important to understand what these terms mean. What is gender blind? What is gender sensitive? What is gender responsive? What is gender transformative? So gender blind would be to overlook at any gender issues, even though it is recognized as an important aspect to any strategy or program. To be gender sensitive is to at least recognize that there are differentiated rights, roles, responsibilities for women and men, that again, women and men will have these different needs, capacities, priorities, different knowledge, as we have been discussing as well, my fellow panelists. Gender responsive is then taking the next step, is being able to include very specific actions in your planning, in your programming, in your budgeting, which is somewhat important. And when you're gender transformative is when these actions are finally going to be implemented. And there is this well recognition that gender is central to achieving any development outcome. So if we want REDD to become a development strategy or initiative in our countries, we need to have gender at the forefront. How to do this? I guess that's my next question. As I said, we have been very privileged in working with the standards and the social and environmental standards. And the story with the standards was that we initially wanted to understand what was the gender dimension in the principles, criteria, and indicators. But we realized that it was not enough, that we also needed to provide some suggestions on the know-how. And in the back of the room, I have some publications there, and in the back of the room, you will have this yellow publication. Oop. And this would be, to me, our first attempt, sorry, too many papers, our first attempt to be able to provide the how in many occasions. And it is not by far an exhaustive document. It's a work in progress, and it is a work that needs to be tested. People in countries need to take it, adapt it, prioritize it, put it in action, and allocate resources to it. And in the checklist, we talk about some of the main issues around REDD: land tenure, benefit sharing, governance, participation. All of these are equally important. Usually gender ends up being mentioned or addressed at more the participation level. But we have seen today that land tenure, for example, is crucial. So just to give you one little example of an action, for example, being proposed, it's to survey initially the situation of women in the country and try to understand what their land user rights are or their land tenure rights are. And making that distinction for women is quite important. That is the first step. The next step, well, it could be to determine the barriers that they face to be able to access land tenure. The next step would be, of course, to document policies. What is happening at the country level? What policies are there? As Matilda was saying, there is a land reform going on. So we need to influence that process as well. And once those policies are in place, then you can start thinking of how you are going to ensure that there's going to be an implementation of those policies.
Do we have an example of a country which has gone through these steps and reached a good result in terms of gender mainstreaming? Can you quickly mention that?
Not all of the steps, but what is interesting is, for example, Solange yesterday in the land, in our presentations yesterday on opportunities and rights, opportunities and challenges to rights, was mentioning an essential action, which is to strengthen women's networks. So there are examples of countries that have done many of these actions. And what we have done through, again, the work with the social and environmental standards is to be able to compile those experiences plus the experiences of the voices of women and men from the 4 countries that we have visited in order, again, to start this process of understanding the how-to. Not only gender is important to be overlooked, to be addressed in issues as land tenure, as I said, participation, benefit distribution, but more, again, of the how based on these. But I invite everybody to take a copy and to use it and to provide feedback. And I think that this is a living document and a living tool that can grow from the experiences of all of us working on REDD issues.
I would like to come back, to Kushoro. You talked about positive discrimination and segregation as one of the ways to make sure that the voices of men and women are heard. But I would like to understand whether there are not local level institutions which enable more integrated, here I'm talking about having men and women, young and old, together discussing what are the challenges they are facing in terms of the drivers of deforestation and degradation, the role that they play on that, and also to work out together what are the solutions. You say that men, say we need the money to stop doing this, and women says we need tools to improve efficiency and productivity of the systems. So how do REDD moves in the context of these different expectations and no institutions apparently to bring the different groups together to agree on a common path?
One way to do that is, of course, developing tools or best practice, I would say, on what already happening. One way to do that, but it is not local situation. Second, also not local, is strengthening gender role or promoting women's stronger women's role are there enshrined in some of the standard, even in our national standard. But is it enough? Of course, it's not enough. But if we, for example, the best way to go probably is we improve the standard, but in a way that it will not put more burden to already difficult, right? So not attaching more strings to it for some people. Now, how exactly we do it? That's I think the challenge. At local level, initially we thought having men and having women confronting men, for example, or having debate at the local level, will will make things worse in some situation, because facilitating that will try to shake the establishment at the local level, and even some fellow women villagers are reluctant to do that, because what they need to confront are their kinsmen, their husband, their father, their wife. But with best practice, if you like, things could change from something need to worry to something more productive, because they can feel each other. So at the lower level, what I want to propose is to gather more, I would call it best practice on how to do this kind of things.
Esther Luna, are there best practices in terms of local organization and institutions that can enable men and women and young people and old to together make decisions? From your experience with the indigenous peoples, how are those institutions working in that context?
Yes, for indigenous communities in Mindanao, if you look at the structure, it's more egalitarian. Sometimes people would react like it's a male-dominated tribal council. But when they do make an agreement, if one ba'i disagrees, that's a big thing. And no decision would come out. She's only one person. She might be serving drink, tea, coffee, serving food, but she listens. She's also part of the, let's say, the critical eye to make decisions. Sometimes we see things gender in numbers, but it's really a matter of who gives the important decision. And over above human beings making decision of our nature, what is also very important is to seek the permission of the spirits. That's why a lot of programs need acceptance rituals. A lot of agreements, memorandum of agreements, contracts sealed with ritual. Those who will fail on his duties made nature spirit strike against you. The woman, the female shaman of Kitanglad, was able to ask the brigadier, the commander who ordered bombing in Kitanglad, because they were running after rebels. And the kids, the children, they were describing the bombs are like thermos dropped from the helicopter. They have no experience with war and these kinds of armed fightings. But there was no press about the incident of bombing. But the tribes knew that there were lives taken. And when a life is taken in ancestral domain, the unjustified killing cannot be accepted. There should be a cleansing ritual. So the Ba'i sought the help of the vice governor, the governor, that please summon the commander of that battalion. I want to speak to him. If lacking the credibility as a leader, no commander would ever show up. But since we are bridging the rights of indigenous people, they cannot ignore the call. So he showed up and said, submit to a ritual to say sorry. There has been no precedence on this in Bukidnon. And he said, so what am I going to present to the ritual as a payment for the damage of environment? Like this one intact forest that was, there's a hole there after dropping bombs, although no disclosure how many were killed. And he said, pig, but the color should be golden with a spotted black. And then those in the government said, only that one pig to pay for the damage of the forest? Yeah, I don't demand it, it's the spirits. What was not understandable for the military commanders that is a high form of payment. White pig could be just simple sorry, but if it's colored, that's a very serious offense. But he submitted to the ritual because Ba'i said, when we speak of things to be done, it should be done. We comply or not, we have to do it, but I cannot assure you what will happen to you and your men. So they did come and submit to the ritual process. And this is one form of acceptance that the military conceded and to say sorry. We tried to invite the other side, the rebels, they didn't show up. But in the long run, in the future, we really have to see ancestral domains and sacred spaces. I would even suggest managed ancestral domains with tribal governance is also value added in REDD+, because they've been preserving forests over time. So what is the contribution of the program to these kinds of traditions that is still vibrant and protects and maintain the integrity of forests?
Yeah, it all comes to understanding, those
Absolutely.
norms and institutions. I know that we said we talk about communities are not homogeneous, and we're talking about gender, men and women, but I think there is another dimension, which is generation. Who within the communities of different genders are we talking about? I would like Matilda to elaborate on the work that you are doing and the role that youth, besides being men and women, play or can play in gender, in REDD related issues, and what the policies need to be set in place to enable that generation equity to happen.
Okay, after we had a work with before the elaboration of the Cameroon RPP document. We had a workshop with WIDO and IUCN. That's made Refakov being on the front line on gender issues in Cameroon. Take consideration that in the RPP document, gender was taken into consideration. Women are stakeholders and are being taken into consideration. But another dimension into this top-bottom approach, we decided to take it from the bottom approach, that we should catch them young, because there are some of our cultural values, even though the laws are there in terms of gender equity, it's going to take a very long time to have gender balance. So we decided that let us start with the youth, the children in primary school. We introduce environmental education to them in respect to this. And I know when they grow up, and this red thing has come to stay. It is something that has come to stay. This climate change issue is an issue that has come to stay, and we have to catch them here. We have to involve the youth and the children in this as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. So education is an important aspect. I would like to move now to give you the opportunity to comment, to ask questions. I'm sure there are many of you working on REDD and gender-related issues, and we would like to hear from you on your insights. Anyone to take the floor? Pradeepa, sorry. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Pradeepa. I'm from Guyana in South America. I've heard that you outlined for the areas in planning and in developing systems for REDD+, especially at the project level, that you recommend strongly the mainstreaming of gender within the context of those plans and the development stages. I have a comment and a question that for any member of the panel to respond, if you may. In Guyana, on our work on the MRV, the Measurement, Reporting and Verification System, although quite a technical undertaking, we've sought to mainstream gender from the initial stages throughout the implementation, so that I think Matilda was mentioning you need to include this from the start and to include the youth as well. Not only women, but also young males, so that we can institutionalize the knowledge and the understanding of what really is required for one of the core technical areas of REDD+. So we've seen it as very important, and actually I think it would speak to the sustainability of some of these matters, because in the area of MRV in Guyana, we've seen that the involvement of women has allowed for many of the actions to be continuous over time, not only in terms of the planning stage, but taking through those activities towards implementation in terms of the continuity. So that has been our experience, and it has been a positive one for us in Guyana. And we see it as not only important for the typical, traditional, non-technical issues, but also for technical areas of REDD+, like in the areas of forest carbon measurement, forest area assessment, GIS, remote sensing, and the core areas of MRV. My question, From your experiences across the rich, diverse range of countries that you all represent, how do you see this being practically implemented on the ground in the various regions? Is it something that is still very idealistic, or is it something that we see can be easily translated to practical action in the context of the experience in the various regions?
Thank you. We can take one at the back.
Hello, my name is Nita Murjani from the Norwegian Embassy in Jakarta. If we talk about gender, we tend to refer to women, but I'm thinking that gender must be like an equality of, both women and men. I think they should play equal role or give equal contribution to the initiative. My question is, because now gender, we try to consider that gender is the important component for our partners or grantees projects, like maybe in connection to the previous questions, like how can it be practically implemented in the programs? Because many partners saying that, as Matilda said, maybe that, okay, we have, there is an equal participation of women and men in the workshop, for example, and that's enough. But I think there should be more than that, that how then gender can be mainstream in the programs. And maybe to add to it is then what kind of indicators that we can use to measure the gender mainstreaming in the program, in the project. So that's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. You can pass the mic to the person next to you. Next.
Buenos días, soy Irma Alicia Velázquez de Guatemala. He trabajado muchos años con mujeres indígenas.
Desculpa, pode, sorry, I'm speaking now in Portuguese. Can you just...
Sí, sí, sí.
Yeah.
Sí.
It's for English, it's number 4. Please go ahead.
Okay. He trabajado en los últimos años con mujeres indígenas de Guatemala, de los 24 pueblos indígenas que existen, y quiero ser muy honesta. El concepto de género como tal es algo que se conoce, es algo que se maneja, aquí no hay nada nuevo. Pero para mí el desafío es cómo transformamos y cómo hay un impacto en la vida de las mujeres indígenas. Creo que el tema de discusión es un tema que tiene ya un límite. El desafío más grande es cómo las niñas, las adolescentes y las mujeres pueden ver materializada la equidad en sus vidas. En muchos eventos que a veces se realizan o que nos toca realizar, las mujeres llegan, pero llegan más presionadas porque se tienen que cumplir con requisitos para obtener los fondos, pero no porque realmente ellas sientan que eso va a transformar sus vidas. A lo interior de las organizaciones hemos encontrado también que los hombres permiten la participación de las mujeres por la presión de las líneas de cooperación, pero no porque ellos estén conscientes de que ahí, a través de esta metodología, vamos a lograr el cambio en la vida de las mujeres. También el concepto de género como tal, he encontrado severos cuestionamientos en diferentes pueblos indígenas, porque es una categoría que tiene límites para comprender los alcances complejos de las cosmovisiones de cada pueblo. Creo que la teoría de género ante esto ha tenido severos límites. Mi pregunta es, ¿cómo hacemos para modificar desde arriba para que realmente haya un impacto en la base y pasemos ya de tanta discusión a muchas más acciones y ver impactos reales en la vida de las mujeres, especialmente las mujeres indígenas?
Thank you very much. Jeanette, please, over there.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Jeanette Gurung. I'm the director of WOCAN, which is Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture, Natural Resource Management. I would like to commend all the speakers. I think some of these points were excellent. And of course, we've worked with Andrea and Rito on this for quite a long time. But I would like to share with you as well a product that we've just released and some work we've been doing as well. Again, following up on Andrea's need for the how-to and the concrete. WOCAN is working with UN REDD and with a program called LEAF, which is a USAID-supported project across Asia, lowering emissions in Asia's forest. And we've created a joint initiative to focus on women's inclusion. It's not a gender approach, but as someone who's been working in the forest sector for 2 or 3 decades, we still see women excluded from all the processes, not just the meetings, but the big decisions. So we said we have to start here. And we've been trying to get groups of people at a national and a regional level to reflect on why is exclusion of women in forest-related sectors so difficult to challenge. I mean, I really don't think we've made enormous changes over the last 30 years on this. So anyways, we did a scoping study on best practices for women's inclusion, and we drew from sectors outside of forestry, recognizing that forestry is really not the place to be looking for good practices. So we've been looking in agriculture, we've been looking in water management and many other ways. And we've come up with a matrix that produces 10 enabling conditions and good practices for women's inclusion. Now, what was interesting was we were looking at this across different levels. We found probably 95% of the good practices came from community level, either groups that were doing organically finding ways to include women, or perhaps small projects that were doing it. Where we did not find good practices was at the institutional levels and in the policy levels. So clearly, if you look in a matrix sense, you need to see these good practices go across all levels in order to understand how it's institutionalized. So anyways, this report is now up on our website at www.wocan.org, just released this morning. We've also done country studies on Sri Lanka and Cambodia. One is also underway in the Philippines. So what we're doing with this study is then we have national level dialogues, again with stakeholders in each country, to one, look at the scoping study and see if it can be confirmed or if there's problems with it at the country level. The second step is UN REDD then does a second dialogue with the policymakers and the REDD actors at the country level to come up with an action plan based on that. So that's our attempt as well. We feel, as expressed here, we've been working in gender mainstreaming for a number of years. It's very difficult. There's too much glaze over of the eyes. So we thought, like Andrea said, can we provide concrete examples, how to, almost like a menu. Here's some concrete things you could do. Here's some places where you could see it's been successful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take a second round if you allow me. I would like to give the panelists the opportunity to respond to the questions. MRV, including gender issue, is being undertaken in Guyana. Can it be implemented elsewhere in the countries where you are working? And can we change the top? I mean, the policy makers, the decision makers, to really make sure that the gender mainstreaming happens, because as everyone says, it's not something new we've been talking about, and we acknowledge the importance, but how do we make that change happen? And someone was talking about not just the presence of women being enough to show influence on the decision making. What kind of indicators can be used to track the changes and in mainstreaming gender in REDD and other policies? Anyone wants to start? Please. Okay. Thanks. Sure. Yeah.
But for PERDEPA, no question that women should be involved in all the process, including MRV. carbon accounting and stuff. But in local situation, that depend on whether their men will allow them to do those kind of things. If they go far from the village to the plot to measure the carbon, they might be. But if it is not that burdensome, then normally it would happen. But if we're talking about concrete example, what we do, for example, because our project now move from development phase into implementation phase, then making sure that women have greater control over the most valuable resource we discussed, probably we see that's one way to go. So, for example, what we actually do in the field is, and this is what we mean by positive discrimination, to ask the community institution that when it is about money, the money that will be coming in, within the benefit sharing, that it is in the hand of women. So women control the money coming in from REDD project. That one way to go. So for Nita, probably that's the one of the indicator is how, is related to control. How big women access to control, how big they control over precious resource. We're talking about in this case, if it is implementation of REDD, then the incoming money after MRV of the performance, and this is not something that so difficult from our experience. So initially the men will say, no, we want to control the money. But when we ask them, do you really think that it is better for you to have men controlling the money than women? Then the honest answer is no, actually better women to control that money. And by having that things, because it is result based, then you ensure you can have more stronger belief that the performance side, the result based, because the promising coming in is based on the result. Then you have both, and if you like, one is the performance things, and the other one is the use of the proceed from that performance. Then, so in practice, transfer the control over the precious resource to women is one of the indicator.
Yeah, in fact, there are examples, for example, in Tanzania, where there are REDD projects which are in terms of payment for performance. They are paying not just women, but they pay men, women, as well as young people. And you have FAS in Brazil also having chosen to pay women to ensure that money can be reinvested in the family, in meeting food security, but also contributing to health and other priorities. So that's an important aspect. I would like other people to comment.
Thank you for those great questions, and Jeanette as well contributing with the fantastic work that WOCAN has been doing. This shows us that there are many initiatives that can help as guidance, as we were saying, on how to do things. And this is my attempt of actually answering the 3 questions, and bear with me here. So the first 2 questions are more on the how, are more on what could we provide as suggestions to our programs at different levels, from the technical aspects to the more governance level aspects, such as ensuring participation, women's full and effective participation in decision making as well, which is one of the key issues that women face. And to that, I would have to say that here is where these lessons learned, these good practices, can help us shed some light. Is there a silver bullet? No. We really need, as I was saying initially, to have this stepwise process where you look at these best practices, but you have to realize what is the national context, what is the local context, what is the specific situation that is happening, adapt the suggestions and the good practices, and then prioritize. Because if not, if you really do not have that thought process and you try to fit in these bigger suggestions and try to overimpose it, you will perhaps not have the results intended. And to that, very specific examples for MRV in Cameroon, for us, it was an eye-opener that Cameroonian women and men were asking, for example, for the curricula of those people going into forestry to be modified so that you can have opportunities for both women and men to be part of these more technical aspects. I think that we need to take even a step further down. This could be a legacy for girls. We all know that women are not involved in science areas. We all know that forestry is usually a male-dominated sector. And the reason is why. And once we find that why and those barriers, I think we need to take actions to offer opportunities. Practical implementations and suggestions for country level, for the country level programs from NORAD. I think that, again, between the work that we have done, that IUCN has done, and that WOCAN has done as well, there are many of these suggestions. But these suggestions cannot go just as an isolated process. It has to be accompanied by enabling conditions such as capacity building for staff, sensitizing the importance of these issues, understanding how you can also address gender in a very practical way from the beginning, as we've been discussing. So that would be my suggestion. Indicators, they can easily be produced, as I said, with some of the suggestions that we have. And I read some, but for benefit sharing system, you can think of really interesting indicators of seeing how the contracts between governments and the different communities are elaborated. Do they have different options of payment? Is it all going to be money? What do women want?
Thank you. Please go ahead, Stella.
Yeah. I'd like to respond to a way if a policy of gender really be leading to something that's transformative, or how do we look forward to kind of behavior that support gender responsive or very respectful attitude. Allow me also to demystify. I don't want to say that there's no gender inequality in the indigenous communities, because as long as we see different functions, different roles and responsibilities, there's always differentiation. But how do tribal kids grow up in an equitable world? There had to be a modeling, and it should start with parents. If there's top-down impositions, but the sense of enjoyment of what is real and true in terms of balance should be felt in our lives, because that will be an indicator to where we want to work with, to whom we want to collaborate. Tribal kids in their school for living traditions learn culture. Male or female, there's no discrimination. Because what is important, if there's a storm that is imminent, any child can perform the ritual. If the child is in the forest, knows what to respond, how to summon help to the spirits. When Bopa hits the eastern side of Mindanao, partly hit central Mindanao, the female leader had to go to the mountain, to the lowland village, braving the storm that is so strong. And she did it alone. And why? Why did she have that courage? Because the spirits guide were with her. And to put something sacred there to protect the community, she would have to do that. But in the absence of Bayan Atlawan, if she happens to be in Manila attending conference, any child would do. Part of what is important is the spirituality, because that's where the sense of righteousness comes in each one of us. And that's why, well, indigenous communities could be a model, but we live through our own realities. But if we resonate in terms of spirituality, that we do believe that the human beings are not only decisive on this earth, but also other spirits, beings that coexist with us, then welcome to the world of balance.
Thank you. I would like to give the participant another chance. I had one hand here, one there, three. And perhaps we will close. Okay. it doesn't matter where. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Signe Howell. I'm from the University of Oslo. And I've been researching REDD in various countries through my students for about 4 years now. And I mean, as far as I can see, at least in the countries that we've been, REDD still is very much at a discursive level. There's still very, very few REDD projects anywhere. REDD readiness, pilot, or indeed REDD itself. So we're still talking very much in a sort of potential future about what REDD might or might not be, because we just don't know what it is. And listening to all of you here and yesterday, I was interested because most of you have been involved in your activist activities for a very long time. So then I'm thinking, well, what if anything is special about REDD in your long careers of trying to change, gender poverty alleviation, community forestry, saving trees, and so on. Now, is REDD in a sense an opportunity? I mean, do you regard REDD as an opportunity that might enable you to actually further your course in a new sort of way? Or is it more or less business as usual with just a slightly different sort of financial source? Is REDD, well, I mean, yeah, it's, REDD is very high profile, and is this something that you feel that you can use for your own sake to further your course further within the REDD? So that's really what it's a lot of unintended consequences of REDD, I think, that we've been talking about. The co-benefits seem to be bigger and bigger, and I'm just wondering to what extent you regard this yourselves as a new opportunity.
Thank you. Can you pass the mic just behind you? Thank you.
My name is Thomas. I write for C4's websites. This is a good continuation to the previous question. I see all the discussions so far have been at the project level. Have you seen any percolation of what you're saying into the international level, into those famous safeguards that everybody's been talking about for the past 2 years? And if not, do you expect this to happen? Do you have any expectations for the next COP on this, for example?
Thank you. And Solange is okay. Oh, please start here.
Thank you. My name is Solange, and I work for the Rights and Resources Initiative, RRI. I have 2 questions for Ahmad, but that can apply to the panelists. In his opening remarks, Ahmad mentioned that the main benefit is carbon when it comes to REDD, and he was making the link with women and gender. So my questions are like the first one: will the carbon market provide avenues for transformative change for gender and poverty? And the second one, if so, how will the carbon market benefit women, indigenous peoples, and the poor?
Thank you. And the last one, I will allow the last one. We are running short of time. If you could be concise.
Thank
please.
you. I'll try to be short. My name is Gro Lindstad, and I am with Focus Forum for Women in Development here in Norway. Almost 20 years ago at the conference in Beijing, we talked a lot about mainstreaming. And now, almost 20 years later, I think that we see that it hasn't worked the way we wanted it to. But we still sit here today in this workshop talking about how important mainstreaming is. Isn't it time that we start also looking more at the fact that we have to do something in addition to mainstreaming to actually advance women also in REDD out of poverty? The fact that there was no mention of gender in REDD until Cancun in 2010, I think is a good example of this. So I just wanted to hear your input on this.
Thank you very much. Matilda, do you want to comment on any of?
I think REDD is REDD process provides the opportunity to clarify issues regarding tenure rights and access to forest resource challenging remains with gender inequality that limits the access and control productive resources, especially land. women may not benefit under REDD Plus because they lack and have restrictive land tenure rights. But the REDD Plus, I think it's a positive step in this aspect, because with our work and research, we are in the forefront to reform the women's access to rights, resource and to women access to women's rights in access to land tenure, resource management, and benefit sharing in cost of this project.
Thank you. Any other comments? We had 4 questions, and you will.
If REDD or any other programs would allow continuity of management, access, and maintenance of resources, be that male or female leaders in the community, then I would support for that. But looking at REDD as an also opportunity, the tribes are asking me already, in our future summit, we call it Lambaga, the summit of elders from 7 mountains, to explain REDD. And we're not really as, excited or, really positively responsive, because what is also our learning in the last 2 years when we participated in the Code REDD Plus preparation for the National Strategy Program in the Philippines is that traditional leaders who were invited in the consultation workshop reacted. Why are you accounting something that is unseen? And what is it among humans that every talks about payment and payment and payment for something so intergenerationally sustained? And how, it sends a kind of pride. You have resources to pay. Where does REDD applies? To simple communities or to the communities whose lifestyle damage other countries? So we, as the traffic agents, the mediating institution, working with the state and trying to mediate the rights of indigenous people, would have to be careful, even in the translation of REDD. And even in the indigenous term, we're finding it hard. That's why we need more images, more graphics. And they would say, can you allow us to dream for responses? A lot of it would have to be dreaming and consulting also with the spirits. So last summit, we included REDD in the discussion, but it was more on the reflection on climate change. Why is it happening now? And maybe in the December Lambaga, we will tackle REDD, because they've really been asking, and this guy, our counterpart in IUCN would be there to help explain. But towards the end, that will be our responsibility, the translation and the right context to understand it.
Sorry, I want to I don't want to cut you, but we are really running out of time. I just want to give opportunities to Kushora and Andrea just to comment on the questions before we put our closing remarks.
Thank you. To address the first question, what's special about REDD and why are we working at different levels? When REDD was proposed back in 2005, I think that one of the biggest concerns of many of the women's organizations and networks that had been working on forestry issues was the fact that, again, the forestry sector was somewhat gender blind. And what was seen as a threat back in 2005 then became somewhat of an opportunity. And with this, I don't want to sound as a REDD optimist, but as an opportunity of proposing that this new initiative was designed from the beginning, including mention or reference to gender considerations, and that was the window of opportunity for us to then untangle what these gender considerations were and start proposing what could happen on the ground. What is the end result that we're looking for? Would this support our cause, as you mentioned? Hopefully it will. I think that all of us, we have, well, I have not been working for 20 or 30 years, but I do have to say that looking at the history of the evolution of how we have worked with gender equality and the results on the ground, we really need as well to start thinking outside the circle, not even the box.
Thank you.
Just really briefly, Isilda,
Please.
I need to close
Very
my idea.
Yeah.
And it is the fact that gender equality, as our colleague from Guatemala was saying, is not a reality around the world, and we really need to use any tools we can. And as for the gentleman asking for international, yes, there are mentions with the safeguards. Yes, there are mentions in Cancun agreement, Durban, Cancun. We can talk a little bit more afterwards of the international efforts, because that's what we are. We are pollinators moving from different scales. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Kushoro, can you respond and also take the opportunity to say one or two key messages that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, so why the belief in REDD, I think we do the same thing differently in terms of development. So in the past, I coming from the conservation, biodiversity conservation organization. In the past, we did ICDP, so pay first and expect impact later. With REDD, we expect impact first, MR fit, and then give the incentive. So the same thing, but to complete the experience, if you like, in doing the same thing. Second, at the national, international level on gender equity, I think it will be in safeguard standard. So I would expect a long discussion from now on principle, criteria, indicator, and stuff like that. Will it be gender transformative? Yes, if women can control the whole REDD, discourse. And what we can do now at this moment, for me, is at the local level. If they control the money, again, they control not because of ideological reason for me, but empirically they are better in identifying ways to cope with threat. That's one thing. The second is on accountability when it is coming from managing money for benefit sharing mechanism. So the hope is big. So it's more than mainstreaming. It is a chance to have something concrete. Yeah.
Thank you. Matilda, any closing remarks, please?
I think REDD, to me, REDD is a positive step towards solving some pertinent problems in our African society in terms of land tenure, forest resource, and users' rights. I think REDD is a very big tool for us to use and to equally take it down to the youth and the children in the school. Is a great tool that in the long run it will transform inequality in gender mainstreaming.
Thank you. Esther Luna, your final remarks, please.
If REDD comes in Kitanglad or in Northern Mindanao region, then let it be subject to cultural impact assessment, what good it has done to the community, and let their voice and evaluation comes out.
Thank you. Andrea?
Thank you. First, final remark, comprehensive process. We need to focus on enabling conditions, we need to focus on strategies, we need to develop these, and as well we need to implement them through projects. We really need to start taking the whole process and thinking again of this as an entire process to be able to ensure that gender equality gets not only mainstream but implemented when working on REDD. And the second key message for me is exchange of experiences and good practices. There are many examples. There are people working on the ground. There are new ideas being proposed. We need to as well map who's doing what, who can provide this technical support as well, and again, how can we all contribute to this common understanding of what a gender consideration is and how we're going to ensure that REDD is gender transformative at the end, and how we are going to start working with the relationships between women and men and offering the same opportunities, voice, and rights to everybody. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite you to give a round of applause to the panel and to thank you very much for your contributions. Thanks.